You're floating more than 320,000 kilometers from home, and something just breaks. No explosions, no alarms. It just breaks. And the first thing you feel isn't fear. It's the math entering your head. Oxygen runs out in 4 hours, water in 2 days. The nearest rescue is 3 days away, if you're lucky. Space doesn't kill by screaming. It kills in silence, with things that seem small. A cracked rubber seal, a solar panel that won't deploy, even 750 grams of foam. And today, you're going to feel the 9 moments when everything went wrong. Not NASA's version, not the movie version. The real version, the one they try to bury, the one no one survived to tell. This one. Let's begin. The smell of burning Velcro. Do you know that smell? Neither do I. But the 3 men trapped in that cabin did. January 1967. You're sitting in the command module. Grissom on the left, White in the middle, Chaffee on the right. A launch simulation, still on the ground. And here's the detail no one talks about. You knew there were problems. Grissom even hung a lemon on the spacecraft as a protest. A lemon, like saying, this thing doesn't work. But NASA had a schedule. The space race was on. Kennedy had promised the moon by 1969. So, you board anyway. The cabin is sealed. Pure oxygen is pumped in, over 16 pounds per square inches of pressure. Then you hear it. Fire. Not a small fire. Pure oxygen reacting with Velcro, with nylon, with every flammable material NASA included to save weight. Flames spread in seconds, and panic takes over. And the hatch? It was designed to open inward to stay secure in a vacuum. Now, the internal pressure is forcing it shut. It can't be opened. It takes about 90 seconds to open it from the outside with tools. White tries with his bare hands, burning his fingers on the handle. 17 seconds of real terror. Carbon monoxide fills their lungs before the flames even reach them. 2 veterans, and one who never had his chance. Grissom had flown Gemini. White was the first American to walk in space. Roger had never been to space, maybe dreaming of seeing Earth from above. They died on the ground, in a simulation, in pain and desperation, until the final second. NASA's first disaster didn't happen chasing the moon. It happened chasing a deadline. You look at the spacecraft and see 200 problems, not maybe something could go wrong. 200 technical reports saying you are going to die. April 1967. Komarov in the locker room. And he has a choice. Refuse the flight. But if he refuses, the backup, Yuri Gagarin, flies instead. If I go, I become the first man to die on a Soviet space mission, a national hero, the face of the Soviet Union. Imagine that weight. You die, or your best friend dies, and you know whoever flies is not coming back. Did Komarov board to save Gagarin, or to secure his place in history? Launch, nominal. Orbit, nominal. Then the solar panel fails to deploy. Power drops. The orientation system collapses. The capsule starts spinning. He tries to stabilize it manually. It's not working. Ground control orders immediate abort. And somehow, you manage. You align for re-entry. You bring the capsule down. Speed increasing, heat rising, altitude dropping. 5,000 meters. Time to deploy the main parachute. It doesn't open. Still falling. 4,000 meters. Time for the reserve parachute. It tangles with the main chute. 3,000. 2,000. 1,000. You have just enough time to understand exactly what's about to happen. 140 kilometers per hour. Straight into the ground. Komarov became the first human to die during a space mission. And the cruelest part? His final transmission was recorded. In his last minutes, he was crying, cursing the engineers, cursing the program. A Soviet general was on the line, listening, unable to do anything. Politics doesn't fly spacecraft, but it kills the ones who do. At least his death was quick. Actually, no, it was worse than you imagine. Soyuz 11? They were conscious for 30 minutes, feeling the air escape and their chests tighten. You just broke a world record. 22 days in space and a perfect mission, heading home, eager to be embraced by the crowd, welcomed with parades and medals of honor. And you die at 140 kilometers of altitude, about 30 minutes before landing. June 1971. 3 cosmonauts say goodbye and depart from the Salyut 1 space station. One last handshake with ground control over the radio. See you soon. The orbital module separates for re-entry. There's a pressure equalization valve. It's supposed to open at 4 kilometers when the atmosphere is already dense. It opened at 140. In the vacuum, first you feel wind, but it's your own air escaping. Suddenly, your ears rupture from the inverted pressure difference. The atmospheric pressure inside your body tries to equalize with the vacuum. Your blood begins to boil due to the lack of pressure. Nitrogen bubbles form in your veins. It's too late to try to breathe. Blood. And none of the 3 were wearing spacesuits. They couldn't afford the space. They needed to save weight. But on that tragic day, saving 20 kilograms of suit cost 3 lives. The capsule landed perfectly on automatic mode. Rescue crews knocked on the hatch. "You all right in there?" Silence. They opened it. 3 bodies, eyes open, blood coming from their noses, a scene of horror, their fingers still gripping the seatbelts. They tried for 30 minutes to hold on to the air that remained. It wasn't enough. The only time in history that human beings have died in open space. Not during launch, not during atmospheric re-entry, but up there, where the silence is absolute and no one can hear you, screaming is useless. There is only the endless dark. From that day on, pressure suits became mandatory whenever depressurization is possible. 3 lives bought that rule, but at least that was an accident. Nedelin? Nedelin was a date on a calendar, and it killed more than 50 people at once. You're standing on the launch pad, exactly where you should never be. It's October 1960. Marshal Mitrofan Nedelin wants the missile launched before November 7th to celebrate the anniversary of the Bolshevik Revolution. The Kremlin loves symbols, and Nedelin loves pleasing the Kremlin, a powerful man desperate to impress. So what happens? An absurd deadline, exhausted workers, engineers pushed beyond their limits, shortcuts everywhere, safety procedures ignored just to make it on time. More than 100 people stand around a fully fueled R-16 missile. It's loaded with hypergolic propellant, the kind that ignites on its own the moment the chemicals touch. And the second stage? It's armed. Then someone gives the wrong command. The second stage engine ignites. A fireball erupts over 3,000 degrees Celsius. Asphalt melts. People run in every direction, but fences trap them inside. Flames spread instantly. Some are vaporized where they stand. Others burn alive. Some drown in rivers of burning fuel. It looks like a battlefield. Human remains scattered across the concrete. Officially, 54 dead. Maybe more than 100. The Soviet Union hid the disaster for 30 years. Families received letters that said, "Your husband died in a plane crash." A lie. He died because Nedelin wanted to impress politicians. And the irony? Nedelin died too. In the explosion he caused. At least it was instant. Challenger? Challenger gave them time to understand. Minus 0.6 degrees Celsius. Have you ever woken up to that kind of cold? Ice forming on metal? The kind of morning that tells you to stay home? But you launch anyway. The night before, engineers warn about the O-rings. They weren't designed for this. We've never tested below 12 degrees. I am telling you, do not launch. NASA responds, prove that it will fail. That's not how engineering works. You don't prove that something will fail. You prove that it is safe. 73 seconds after liftoff, a thin flame appears, almost invisible, leaking past the solid rocket booster joint. It slices into the external tank like a blowtorch. Then, structural failure. The vehicle breaks apart under forces exceeding 3,000 kilometers per hour. The orbiter doesn't explode the way people think. The crew cabin separates. It falls intact. For 2 minutes and 45 seconds. Later analysis of the controls shows something chilling. Emergency systems were activated. Manually. They were conscious. 7 lives. Millions watching live. Children in classrooms across the country. There had been warnings. There had been data. There had been recommendations. They were ignored. Because of schedule pressure. Because no one wanted to fall behind. You think they learned. 17 years later, 750 grams of foam would set the course for disaster. Foam. Just foam. Not metal. Not fuel. Not an explosive. Insulating foam. About 750 grams. Enough to begin the destruction. Foam had fallen off on previous launches. It happened often. Engineers reported it. Foam shedding. The response? It always falls. It's never been a problem. There's a name for that. Normalization of deviance. When the abnormal slowly becomes normal until control is lost. 82 seconds after liftoff, a piece of foam breaks away. It strikes the left wing at over 800 kilometers per hour. Engineers review the footage. They request high-resolution satellite images to assess possible damage and plan contingencies. NASA denies the request. There's nothing we could do to fix it anyway. Why worry? Why worry? That was the moment they didn't realize there would be no second chance. 16 days later, during re-entry, superheated plasma, over 1,650 degrees Celsius, penetrates a small breach in the wing. It melts the aluminum structure from the inside out. 16 minutes before landing. Total disintegration. 7 astronauts lost. And the cause? Foam. NASA knew foam strikes were a risk. Reports dated back to 1988, but after 87 launches without catastrophe, it had become acceptable. What they didn't expect was this. Normalizing risk doesn't eliminate risk. It only postpones it. It turns the question into when. Not if, but at least Columbia had no choice. Apollo 13? Apollo 13 had a choice, and it chose to come back. 3rd day of the mission. Everything normal. Routine. Systems stable. Then, bang. It wasn't sabotage. It wasn't a mistake made during the flight. It was 5 centimeters. Just 5. Years earlier, during maintenance, an oxygen tank had been dropped about 5 centimeters. It didn't seem like much. No visible damage. No alarms. But inside, something had cracked. Now, in deep space, the tank explodes. Oxygen leaking. Power fading. The command module slowly dying. Solution? Shut everything down. Use the lunar module as a lifeboat. There's one problem. The lunar module was designed for 2 astronauts. For 2 days. You are 3. And you'll need it for 4. The temperature drops to 3 degrees Celsius. Water condenses on the walls. Droplets float in microgravity. Carbon dioxide levels rise. The filters in the lunar module aren't compatible with those in the command module. So you build an adapter. With duct tape, cardboard, plastic bags, a sock. In space. And it works. Re-entry approaches. No fully functional computer guidance. Manual corrections. Trajectory, calculated, on paper. Then comes blackout. Normal duration, 3 minutes. This time, 6. ODC, Houston. Silence. ODC, Houston. Silence. Then, Houston, Odyssey. Good to hear your voice again. Parachutes deploy. Splashdown in the Pacific. All alive. Apollo 13 wasn't a success. It was survival. It proved that human ingenuity can save more than luck ever could. But the real lesson? Small, invisible damage can hide catastrophic consequences. But at least Apollo 13 was in orbit. The X-15? The X-15 was on the edge, where airplane becomes spacecraft. 80 kilometers above Earth. Are you an astronaut? Depends on who you ask. The North American X-15. a joint USAF-NASA program, a rocket-powered aircraft built to test hypersonic flight at the edge of space. Flight 191. Pilot, Michael J. Adams. The climb goes well, passing 80 kilometers. By U.S. Air Force criteria, that altitude qualifies you as an astronaut. Then, an electrical failure. The attitude indicator loses reference, and when you don't know which way is up, at 80 kilometers, at Mach 5, you start to spin. The controls don't respond correctly. The X-15 enters a hypersonic spin. G-forces rise violently. The airframe wasn't designed for this kind of stress. The oscillations intensify. Then, mid-air breakup. Michael J. Adams becomes the first American astronaut to die during a spaceflight. If you use the 80-kilometer definition and the darker part, the program continued, because testing the edge always demands a price. And someone is almost always the first to pay it. But at least that was fast. At least it was predictable. Parmitano? Parmitano almost died. In a way no one saw coming. Water inside a helmet. In space. In a vacuum. How is that even possible? July 2013. International Space Station. Luca Parmitano, Italian astronaut. His second spacewalk. Routine external maintenance. Then you feel the back of your head getting wet. First thought, the drink bag leaked. But it doesn't stop. In microgravity, water doesn't drip. It floats. It gathers at the back of your helmet, then creeps upward. Over your ears, toward your eyes. It reaches your nose. And you cannot remove your helmet. You're in a vacuum. Taking it off means instant death. Mission Control calls it, abort the EVA, return to the airlock. But now you are, nearly blind, water filling your nose. Outside the station, floating. You can't see properly. You can barely breathe. So you follow the safety tether by touch, by memory, by instinct. The water keeps accumulating. 1.5 liters inside the helmet. 1.5. It takes more than an hour to get back inside. To repressurize. To remove the helmet. He survives. The cause? A clogged filter in the cooling system caused water to backflow into the suit. A design flaw. Luca Parmitano almost drowned in space. In a vacuum. It's the kind of death you can't even imagine. Until it happens. And that's the real pattern. It doesn't matter how many scenarios you simulate. It doesn't matter how many tests you run. There is always a new way to die. That no one predicted. 9 disasters in 47 years. From Apollo 1 in 67 to Parmitano in 2013. And do you see the pattern? None of them were bad luck. Apollo 1 haste. Soyuz 1 politics. Soyuz 11 weight-saving decisions. Nedelin, a deadline on a calendar. Challenger schedule pressure. Columbia normalization of deviance. Apollo 13, invisible damage. X-15, pushing the edge. Parmitano, an untested design flaw. Space exploration doesn't fail. People do. Decisions fail. Timelines fail. Up there is no second chance. No, almost. There is silence. And you are alone. If you felt the weight of that, leave a like. And tell me in the comments, which one do you think was the most preventable? Thanks.